Okay, so here's the first video that we're going to be discussing when we get into perfect competition. We've discussed a little bit in class what that entails, different type of examples, but I'll go over that here in a little bit again in this video. But the first thing I wanted to do was revisit our old friends here, the cost analysis in the short run, our curves that we have. You can see here we have our average variable cost, average total cost, but I have abbreviated it average cost because going forward it's going to be inferred from now on that your average total cost plus your average variable cost equals average total cost, or just basically average cost. Okay, so that's what we'll be using for an abbreviation on our average total costs from here on out. With that being said, let's have a little rejoinder here. Let's look at where our marginal cost curve here is intersecting our two primary cost curves, average cost curves. So first we have marginal cost is going to dip down, as you know, and then it's going to start to spike back up. But as long as the marginal cost curve is below the blue average variable cost curve, we can continue to produce because variable costs are going down. So here is kind of where we get our little bit of our, warning siren or red flag that says, okay, you're going to keep producing this way. You're going to continue to churn out products, output, another unit of output, et cetera, so on and so forth. And also keep in mind, just another unit of output like this is your output on the margin, which you can see going directly up, what the marginal cost is for that additional unit of output, right? So we've crossed this point. Average variable costs after this point, I'll just label this just A. Average variable costs at this point are going to go up, right? However, at this point, all of our average costs, average fixed cost, average variable cost, which is the sum of average cost. Average cost is the sum of average fixed and average total costs. Average costs groups that all in together, right? However, at this point, we still have some fixed costs to worry about. That's sort of still bringing this average cost curve down. So we can continue to produce on the margin a little bit, and then boom, finally we hit this point. Okay, so at this point, after this intersection between marginal cost and average cost, every unit we produce from here on out is going to cost more money. We've reached our minimums in terms of our costs of production, whether that be our inputs of labor or capital. And now if we produce any further from this point, each unit of output is going to cost more than the minimums that we pay for, labor, capital, inputs for that additional unit of output. So now that we know that the primary concern is our average total cost, right? This is where, this is the line of, this is the point that we don't want to cross. If we go above the minimum average cost curve, we go above the very bottom of this average cost curve, each additional unit that we produce is going to cost us more money than we can really operate under in terms of our short run budget. So with that said, let's go ahead and maybe just for the moment we can take out average variable cost here, because we know, again, average cost is average fixed cost. Remember, this is the curve that looks like this. It keeps going down and down, but it never ever hits zero. Never hits zero. Plus average variable cost, which takes on that, as you can see, this sort of bowl shape, right? So when we want to start talking about revenue and sales in the short run, we can focus primarily, if not exclusively, on the average cost curve, this green curve right here. So let's do that real quick right now. And there we go. Now we have our average cost curve, which is the total of our fixed and variable, our average fixed, average variable cost. That's our total. So before we interject any type of revenue curve in here, let's go over essentially the rules or the traits of what is a perfectly competitive market, perfectly competitive economy, what they would times call perfect competition. Let's go over some of those stipulations now. So these are some of the assumptions that we make when we talk about perfect market conditions, the assumptions that we have to make for this typical perfectly competitive market. We've used examples of people selling bottled water, or in the summertime there's a sidewalk just 3 feet apart from each other, a lemonade stand, or in Seattle, Pike Place Market, where everybody's selling fish, but they're all selling the same fish, right? So that comes into one of these, that speaks to one of these rather more important stipulations here for perfect competition, that buyers and sellers are price takers, meaning I can't go with, there's a lot of people selling these different, well, they're not different, they're identical products here, which is this stipulation. We're all selling, say I'm out in Seattle and I'm on the Pike Place Market Street and selling fish, because a lot of fishermen out there. So all these lines, these people just, they have their little vendors out. Maybe this one guy is selling salmon for $35. This other guy over here at his stand, he's selling it for the same price. I could come in there and say, look at all the fish that I caught, right? The fish, trying to make it interesting. That looks more like a whale. Put a little smiley face on him. But I can go in here and say, I want $40. That's not going to work, because all the other customers, our customer base over here, customers, are just going to say, well, this guy charges $35, this guy charges $35, this guy charges $5, this person over here charges $35, they're charging $5, she's charging $35. So no one's going to come to my booth if I'm selling the same exact identical product, same in all else equal, same weight, same coloring, everything else, for $40. They're going to go to the folks that are selling for $35. Of course, then I could say, well, maybe in order to get some more business and take business away from this perfectly competitive market, I could try a different approach or strategy. I'm going to jump into this market and say, you know what? I will, buyers and sellers are price takers. Well, I don't need to take that price. I want to undercut my competition, which, that's a real key word. I want to undercut my competition, but what I'm trying to undercut here is my perfect competition. It's not going to work. I'm going to set up my vendor over here for the fish that I'm selling, right? I'm going to charge $30. Okay, so I might be getting more business coming in, but now in order to keep up with the demand of this $30, I'm going to have to actually produce more output to keep up with that demand. But given this particular market of selling fish, there's only a certain point where I can keep up producing or shelling out the money, the costs, to increase my output here by another 1 unit, 10 units, however many, before I start crossing this intersection. And each additional unit of output is going to cost me more money out of my pocket than what is optimum. Okay, so that's the key point to remember, is in a perfectly competitive marketplace where everybody's selling identical products, people can, jump in and catch some fish and sell them if they like, or they can just pack up shop and leave if they like. Lots of buyers and sellers, lots of sellers, especially. This is what this is, and of course we have our customer base. But that's the whole idea behind undercutting my competition, which is essentially impossible to do in a perfectly competitive market, because again, I have to take the market price as a given, because if I go lower, I'll essentially cost myself out of business. If I go higher, I just won't make any money. So if everybody else on Pike Place Street in Seattle is selling fish, and there's 100 vendors, they're selling the same fish for 35 bucks a pound or something, I'm pretty much stuck with that. If I go lower, I'm going to incur more costs and going to have to shut down. If I charge less, well, I'm not going to make any sales. So these are the conditions for perfect market conditions. These are the assumptions we make for a perfect competitive market. It's very rare that you'll find a true perfectly competitive market, but say again, the lemonade stand, the fish market, people selling just water or something, that's kind of close to perfect competition. There are very few scenarios out there in the economy where it's true, absolute perfect competition. So make sure before you get into the next video, you have a really good idea of what this means. Study those notes, and we'll come back and see what happens with, under these conditions, what happens when we start to introduce our revenue or sales, and where should we be basically producing given what our cost structure is. This is the cost structure for selling fish out of a booth on Pike Place Street. We know what our cost structure is. Now it's all going to come down to the price and whether or not we can stay in this market. So we'll look at that in the next video. Stay tuned.